But as long as the resolution of the conflict continues to evade us, they will just have to keep providing aid and aid and aid and aid. And I think sometimes governments like Canada that do have such a history of peacekeeping think that the only answer is to send troops. That's not necessarily what Canada needs to do. I think that if it steps up to the plate, if it finds other governments that truly believe negotiations have to happen, it could call, one recommendation that I've heard is that Canada and other like-minded nations convene a summit. Bring together the government of Khartoum, bring together Libya, Eritrea, Ethiopia, all of the countries in the region that are in one way or another helping fuel that conflict. Bring China, bring Russia, bring India, bring the European Union, bring the US. Sit everybody down at the table and find a solution. It clearly is not going to happen the way it has been going so far. The hollow threats of the international community have only resulted in more impunity on the part of Khartoum. Khartoum, every time the US threatens, not the US and other entities threaten and do nothing, Khartoum is emboldened to keep up stalling and stalling and stalling, which in turn results in more fractioning of the rebels, more chaos in the region, more death and more destruction. Another way that we think pressure can be brought to bear on Khartoum is by governments pressing China. China is the biggest supporter of the government in Khartoum, purchasing 80% of the oil of the Sudan. It also provides significant military equipment to the Sudan. Without that money, without the equipment, it would obviously be very difficult for Khartoum to carry out the counterinsurgency warfare against the civilian population of Darfur. China, China's policy has always been non-interference with that of its allies. I would choose to interpret it differently. I would interpret it as China being one of the biggest supporters of terrorist state regimes in the world. China supports the Burmese military, which is carrying out a very similar campaign of counterinsurgency in Burma, where of course my sister laureate Aung San Suu Kyi is still imprisoned. It supports Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Obviously it supports Khartoum. It is now getting increasingly involved in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where tens of thousands of women have been raped. The international community needs to put pressure on China, both by divesting from companies that do business with China. 22 states in my country, the United States, have divested. Many, many universities have done so in the US. Canada is beginning to do that. One university, Queen's, has divested. I would suggest that companies here and universities and provinces divest. And I would also suggest that the Olympics be made an issue of concern. When the decision was made to allow China to host the Olympics, human rights groups were lobbying very strongly against it, asking the question, how can you allow China to host what is supposed to be the bringing together of the athletic best of the world in peace, harmony, etc., when it is still occupying Tibet and won't even speak to the Dalai Lama about autonomy, when it commits gross human rights violations in its own country, when it supports the military junta in Burma, when it supports Khartoum. How can that nation be hosting the Olympics? I was looking at its slogan of the Olympics, which is "One World, One Dream." And then I look at the action of China and I think, is that our dream? Is our dream really one world, like the world China envisions, where it gets to take the resources of developing countries as long as they give them the resources, they don't care what regime is there? Is that what we want? Thug regimes around the world celebrating together Olympics? I think governments should refuse to participate as, guests in the Olympics if China does not change its policy. I would therefore call upon Canada to take the lead. It doesn't have to send troops, but take the lead in bringing countries together to boycott the Olympics. Not the athletes, but the governments themselves, out of disgust for the policies of China. Before I end, I would take a few minutes to just comment about the 10th anniversary of the Mine Ban Treaty. It is always a thrill to be in Ottawa. Even though I am told that this is a place where people come to not have fun, I always have fun here. I don't know about the rest of you, but I have fun in Ottawa. I'm here to have more fun. But it was 10 years ago today, on the 3rd and 4th, that 122 nations signed the Mine Ban Treaty, as I said, and Canada's leadership was absolutely fundamental to the achievement of that treaty. It was the challenge by then Foreign Minister Lloyd Axworthy to the governments of the world in October of '96 here in Ottawa, calling upon them to actually negotiate a treaty to get rid of landmines within 1 year and inviting them back here to sign that treaty. And the world responded. The world responded to that daring, brave leadership. And it is daring and it is brave. If no government in the world had responded, it would have been humiliation for the government. And yet, Canada struggled, sent out diplomatic missions, did everything in its power to make it work, and it worked. It had very strong allies in the movement, and we still continue to work with them today. As we're here celebrating that anniversary, I would like to call upon the Canadian government to do the same with cluster munitions. Cluster munitions are a weapon that come out of a big canister. When the canister opens, hundreds, if not thousands, of little bomblets fall out and blow up when they hit people, houses, cars, etc. Unfortunately, many times those cluster munitions do not explode as they're supposed to. They become highly volatile landmines. We saw the most egregious example in 2006 in the summer war between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel, when Israel dropped 4 million cluster munitions on southern Lebanon, 1 million of which did not go off. That means the villages, pastures, the whole of southern Lebanon is blanketed with 1 million volatile cluster munitions. It reawakened the conscience of the world that something has to be done about this weapon before it becomes a global contamination like landmines. Norway stepped up to the plate and called upon nations to do the same thing we had done with the Ottawa process and negotiate the Mine Ban Treaty. Oslo has called upon states to come together and negotiate a convention on cluster munitions by the end of 2008. Unfortunately, Canada has not shown leadership on this issue. Even though you have started destroying your stockpiles, even though you say you subscribe to the process of Oslo, you are not showing leadership. We need Canada to be the same leader on cluster munitions that it has been on landmines. Its reputation is one of a peace-building nation, not just sending peacekeepers, but by its example, by its leadership, demonstrating that we can live in a different world. We need Canada and countries like Canada to continue that leadership. Thank you very much.